As we get ready to get this next session rolling, got a couple of more announcements here. First off, we have another thank you to dole out. We did not forget him, just felt he needed some special attention here. Another member of our planning committee is Mr. Charlie Hamilton with the All Aboard Washington and All Aboard Northwest. So all of you who have been, who registered over the website, for that. Charlie put that together and has been managing that website for us for the last several months. So thank you, Charlie, for your efforts in keeping us digitally connected there. Okay, another announcement. Please everybody remember that we have some wonderful auction items out in the buffet area behind the air wall there. So if you haven't had a chance to go by and check those auction items out, please do. We got some beautiful works of art and some other really cool items available back there. So please go check those out if you haven't already. Some of those items will be migrating with us over to the depot later today, so you'll still be able to view them. There's a website for you guys to go to make bids on those auction items. I forget the website exactly, but it's available through the Summit website and through the BSPRA website. Will take you to the auction site, and the information should be back on the items as well. So again, if you haven't had a chance to peruse those auction items, please do so. All the funds raised for that will go to support the mission of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. So again, please do check those out if you haven't already. And final announcement before we get this next panel going. When everybody goes to the dinner tonight, and we'll remind you one more time before we get out of this ballroom today, make sure if you are going to the gala dinner, make sure to bring your name tag with you, because if you haven't noticed, you either have a little B or a T or a V printed on your name tag, and that is so the waiters at the depot know which entree you actually ordered. So when you go to the depot, if you're going for the dinner, please don't forget to bring your name tag with you so that the wait staff knows exactly which entree to bring you and you don't end up with a vegetarian plate when you wanted the bison, because that would be an absolute disaster. All right. Next up is our session 10, IIJA, more commonly known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. Analysis and opportunities. So this session is going to talk about what are the opportunities available in that infrastructure law for the restoration, expansion, enhancement, improvement of passenger rail service in the United States in the wake of that law being passed. Our moderator is Mr. Jeans-Gail with the Rail Passengers Association, who was a member of our last panel. And joining him on the stage, we have Leo Wetula with Build America Bureau out of the U.S. Department of Transportation, Andrew Johnsen with representing PNWER, Deb Kobrin from the FRA, Laura Shabe from Jacobs, and Mr. Alexander Khalfin from Amtrak. So Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, and I'm going to try to keep this intro brief because I think there's a lot of great knowledge on that stage about what's in this bill, but it's a little bit surreal to be in Billings, Montana talking about the IIJA, because I started working on surface transportation reauthorization this cycle around 2018. Usually you expect it to be a long, grueling process. There's thousands of other advocates involved, lobbyists, government officials, politicians, and so there's a lot of wrangling over what's in the final bill. But looking at the final product, I can see the fingerprints of my organization, the Rail Passengers Association, but also our stakeholders, stakeholder allies, many of who are here. We worked with Mayor John Robert Smith from Transportation for America on his vision for interstate rail compacts. It's in the bill. We started talking with Senator Manchin about a daily service restoration. I know the Big Sky Rail Authority and their Regional Rail Authority and their allies in Montana, especially Senator Tester, kind of took that idea and built out on it and talked about let's restore some routes as well. Funding levels are important, but a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of cost-benefit analysis and not just focusing on the cost of a project and how many riders it will bring, but what kind of benefits it'll bring to the community served. We've been pushing for that for years in the Senate, and it's in the Fed-State Partnership Program. So I think the challenge here is we've been basically talking about the IIJA for the last 2 days, so a lot of the meat is off the bone. But I think that also gives us an opportunity because we don't have to focus so much on an info dump. We can start giving our analysis, our insights, and we have a very good panel. They were already introduced. People who will be in charge of implementing the bill. This is at the point of the reauthorization cycle where the energy moves out of DC and into the states who are in charge of implementing the bill and the vision. So we will begin with Deborah Kobrin from the FRA, and she'll lead us off.
Can folks hear me? Awesome, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deb Kobrin. I work in FRA's National Rail Planning Division Office. What does that mean? I work on our discretionary grant programs. Quick question, if folks can free up one of their arms by show of hands, who knows that FRA has grants available? Awesome, I love it. All right, folks can put their hands down. Put your hand up again if you have applied for one of our grants in the past. Awesome, love it. All right, hands down. And hands up if you have successfully gotten an FRA grant. All right, keep those hands up. No, keep those hands up. Folks, take a look around the room. These are incredibly important resources. These are the folks who know how to get it done. I'm going to talk about our programs, and I'll talk a little bit about how we evaluate applications. But the folks who raised their hand on the end there, they know how to do applications. And so if you have a chance before the end of the day today, I'd encourage you to talk to them. So what is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law? We talk about transformational change, and in terms of what we have for development goals at FRA, these elements probably look familiar. I'll focus on a few, and the key one here is really building a foundation for a long-term rail program. We talk about the BIL or IIJA as a 5-year down payment. This is our chance to show everyone, look at what happens when you give us money. Look at the amazing things we can do, so you gotta keep going after this. So I'm gonna move through these slides fast. Anybody who's interested in receiving the presentation, I'm happy to send afterwards. So don't worry about writing everything down. I promise this can all be yours. So what we have in front of us is the FRA funding out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. On my right, that's $66 billion. That's the money that FRA has already received. It's in our pockets. It's good to go. And the $36 billion on the other side is what Congress has said, we could give you, we might give you, we're not absolutely certain we're going to give you. So, and that 66 is broken up over the course of 5 years, and it's we're evenly doing it across the 5 years. And underneath that, again, you'll see two numbers, again, on my right, going from Amtrak all the way to restoration and enhancement on the other side. That top number is the funding we already have in hand, and that bottom number is the funding we could receive. I do want to note, those top numbers are like Bugs Bunny, my eyes are coming out of my head. They're larger than we have seen in a long time, and frankly, larger than we were expecting to receive. I'm gonna take my time today, and I'm gonna speak more about Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, CRISI, the Federal State Partnership Program, and Interstate Rail Compacts. But feel free to ask me more about the other programs. There's not enough time to do them all. So we had to get a little bit picky. This, quickly, I just wanted to mention, this is a calendar of upcoming publications. You'll note we're about halfway through the publication schedule, though we're more than halfway through the year. In terms of timing, if you're looking at what you can apply for, our new Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant Program funding became available on July 7th. That's, again, all of our programs are going to be open for 90 days, so that's going to close in early October. CRISI, the administrator yesterday said the next few weeks. I hope he can just take the little S off the word week, because we're trying to get that out in the next week or so. And then you can expect the Intercity Passenger Rail Program, the Federal State Partnership funding, to be available in October. And so what is CRISI? CRISI is not a new FRA program. To date, it's been our most popular, heavily subscribed. It's been our bread and butter for all intents and purposes. And it's been our bread and butter because it's consolidated. You can do a little bit of everything. We have $1.5 billion this year. Congress blessed us not just with $1 billion in advanced appropriations, but they gave us an additional $500 million, which is a really strong show of faith that they like this program. And why do they like this program? Well, if you take a look, you can see we can do a lot with it. I will note, I recognize there's a section of the country you can draw a circle onto that does not have many CRISI grants, and that's something we would look to address. But you can do a lot here. We did 24 projects in, I believe it's 46 projects in 32 states. And you can do all sorts of things. So what can you do? First of all, who can apply? This is our broadest eligibility across all of our programs. Any state, part of a state, chartered by a state, city, municipality, if you are public, you are eligible. Tribes are also eligible. That is new for us. Class 2 and 3 railroads can apply directly. This is the only program where short-line railroads can come in directly for funding. And then nonprofit labor can also come in. And why do we have such broad eligibility and applicants? Because we have extremely broad project criteria. You can do all sorts of capital projects. CRISI has been a very capital-heavy program, but you can also do safety technologies, you can do some planning, grade crossing improvements, rail line relocation, research and development, and you can also do workforce development and training, which is something we've done a few projects in, and we're looking to do a few more. And I will note that we have a minimum 25% rural set aside. And I say minimum because we have exceeded that value every single year the program's been in existence. So again, I gotta go quickly. Moving on to the federal-state partnership for intercity passenger rail. This is a program we have $7.2 billion in. This is a program that previously received a few $100 million a year. And it's pretty dramatically transformed from what it was previously under the FAST Act. Now what we're going to do is we have the Northeast Corridor and we have everywhere else. And we're gonna be competing those funds under two separate notices of funding opportunity because there's two different sets of project requirements, and frankly, our notices are difficult enough to read as is. We didn't want to put two completely different sets of requirements and confuse everyone. So the notice of funding opportunity for everything not on the Northeast Corridor will actually come out first in October. And so this is a state of good repair and intercity passenger rail expansion program. We have some annual money, but really the $7.2 billion in advanced appropriations is quite a chunk of change. We also have additional tools in this program including letters of intent and phase funding agreements in recognition that not all projects are necessarily going to be funded under a single grant application. And so how do we show commitments to applicants that we're looking to do things over a multi-year period? And so we're exploring those as we speak. So who's eligible for the federal-state partnership program? Similar, but a little more limited than CRISI, public entities. So the folks I described for CRISI on the previous slide, as well as Amtrak. Amtrak can apply on their own. They can also apply with one or more states. And again, these are to improve intercity passenger rail service, to bring track and other elements into a state of good repair. But this is our big intercity passenger rail service program. And then we have interstate rail compacts. And I wanted to bring this up because I know folks have been asking a lot about this. This is one of our newest programs, and albeit one of our smaller programs. We are expecting to compete around $3 million in this program later this fall. And this program was created to provide technical assistance to folks implementing interstate rail compacts. And that implementation is costs of administration, some planning, preparation of grant applications, and the coordination that needs to happen between the states to do the compact. I do want to note that the program is limited to folks who currently have interstate rail compacts. However, we issued a request for information on Friday afternoon, the time where everybody's looking at their email. But it posted in the Federal Register on Friday, and we ask a number of questions, and one of those questions we're asking is, we know there's folks out there that want to set up interstate rail compacts. What do you need from us? What would be helpful? So if you have the time, I'd strongly encourage anyone and everyone in this room to go ahead and submit a comment. It can be a few lines, it can be a paragraph, and we're asking for comments by September 19th because we're going to try to issue the Notice of Funding Opportunity later this fall. And then if there's one thing you want to take a picture of from my slides, that's my contact information. Again, I'll make sure everyone gets these slides, but I realize I breezed through this quickly. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call, email, or frankly, that's my cell phone number, so you can text it as well. Because my name is Deborah, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. And now I'm going to pass things to my colleague, Leo, from the Bureau to talk about other opportunities at the department.
Great. Thank you very much, Deb. Okay. The Build America Bureau is in the Office of the Secretary of Transportation. We are referred to as the Bureau, which sounds a little ominous sometimes, or as the BAB. So you heard from Deb about some of the FRA opportunities available, but there's also opportunities in the rest of the department, in the Secretary's office, and in the Build America Bureau. So for example, many of you are familiar with the RAISE program, the new mega grant program, those types of things. Those are all operated out of the Secretary's office. And the credit programs are operated out of the Build America Bureau, and we also operate some small technical assistance grant programs. So many are not familiar with the Bureau. If you know anything about the Bureau, normally that you know that we administer the credit programs or the loan programs for the department. But actually we have three functions. The first one, where it says outreach, that's actually our loan program. So we have about $100 billion in credit assistance available currently. We also serve as project advocates. So, we can help you navigate when you come to us and tell us about your projects at any level of project development. If you have a concept, if you have a fully developed project, we can help you navigate through DOT's various offices and programs. Maybe you don't know where to start or what type of funding is available. So we can help you navigate that system. And finally, in the last box, we also offer technical assistance. Some of this we do in-house. We have experts in innovative finance and in P3s. We also have various services that we can provide to you through outside staff. And we also have some grant programs for technical assistance. So this slide shows our major credit assistance programs, our loan programs. So you might be familiar with those, and one of the gentlemen on this stage actually received one of our grants as well. But so our main credit assistance loan programs are the Tiffia program, which is all programs or all types of surface transportation are eligible under this program. The RIF program is for all types of railroad infrastructure. And then we also offer our private activity bonds, which is an allocation of the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. So I'm going to talk really, really high level right now because I think this is going to be more of a dialogue, I think, after we're all done on the stage. So if you have any questions about these programs, I'm very eager to answer your questions. But they're very advantageous to the potential borrower. I've had a number of people actually ask me already, why would we want to borrow money when we can get free money from the FRA or from other sources? And I'm willing to address that question. But as you can see up on the slide, they're very advantageous terms. We can lend up to 75 years on transportation projects, and we lend at the U.S. Treasury rate, which was on Friday was 3.2%. So it's something you're not going to be able to find in the private market. Something that might be interesting to this crowd is a subset of our Tiffia program. It's called the Tiffia Rural Project Initiative. We have a map, and you can see, I think maybe it got cut up here. The website for trying to for identifying which areas of the country are considered rural under different DOT programs. So you can go to that website and check out which areas are rural. But I was going to put a map of Montana, but based on our definition, the entire state of Montana is considered rural because our definition is less than 150,000 persons for the census delimited area. So the advantages of this program are the same. It's very similar to our Tiffia program, except that you could receive loans at half of the Treasury rate, and that's currently about 1.6%. And this is for projects that are from $10 to $100 million. So again, in terms of our current lending capacity, so this is based on our current portfolio and our appropriations for our credit risk premium or our subsidy for our programs. So currently we have about $100 billion in capacity. Most of that is in the Tiffia program, but the Tiffia program does have eligibility for most types of rail infrastructure. About $30 billion remaining in the RIF program, and about $15 billion for private activity bonds. So what are the big differences between the Tiffia and the RIF program is that RIF can finance up to 100% of eligible project costs, and Tiffia can only finance up to 33% of project costs. So, so there are some advantages of both of those programs. So this panel was really about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IIJA, and we don't have really the, huge changes like you see in FRA and the huge funding, influx of funding, but we have had some enhancements to our program under IIJA. One of these is that we are currently able to lend to transit-oriented development under both of our loan programs. So that is Tiffia and the RIF program. So that is something that's really critical. A critical part of any intercity passenger rail service would be stationary development, transit-oriented development. So that is an area that we are able to finance. Another enhancement is that we have received a new appropriation for our RIF program. So previously, the RIF program, you could finance up to 100% of project costs, but there were certain application fees, and that served as a barrier to applicants. So we have received an appropriation to cover that application fee. Another enhancement, as I said, we used to be able to only lend up to 35 years, which was still very, very favorable terms compared to what you get in the private market. But after the bill, we can now lend up to 75 years for certain types of projects. So if you have a very long life asset that you are constructing, we may be able to lend for up to 75 years. And I guess the other big one is that previously, at the end of last year, we ran out of our PABS funding. So we had run through $15 billion of PABS allocation that we previously got authority for, and we were given another $15 billion in PABS allocation. So PABS allocations are really useful for public-private partnerships. In fact, the Brightline Florida projects and the Brightline West projects are our two biggest recipients of PABS allocations. And I think I just saw in the news a couple days ago that Brightline Florida just issued $500 million in bonds under our PABS allocation. And then last but not least, we do have technical assistance programs. As I said, we offer technical assistance in-house. We've also recently, under the bill, set up a Build America Center. So the Build America Center you see in the upper left box, we've contracted with 5 major U.S. universities to help us to provide technical assistance to project sponsors in various aspects of project development. We have our Regional Infrastructure Accelerators program, which the gentleman on the stage was the recipient of one of those grants. These are grants for early stage planning at the regional level that might, and capacity building at the regional level that might eventually lead to applications for our loan programs, but they don't necessarily have to. We gave 5 grants for infrastructure accelerators last year, and we actually just couple of days ago announced the five new recipients. So we currently have 10 infrastructure accelerators around the country. And then under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we were given authority to initiate 2 new technical assistance grant programs. One is for rural communities and tribal nations. Again, that is for planning, and then one is for asset concessions. So that is to help recipients identify assets and opportunities for innovative finance. So I guess this is really my most important slide. Again, I get the question, why would we want to get loans when we could get grants for our projects? I think, you all recognize that to receive grants and to implement your projects, to deliver your projects, the projects need to be fully funded. So you really need to consider all possible, funding and financing opportunities for your project. And we represent one of those opportunities. Many projects would benefit from a combination of grants and loans and grants from various parts of the department and also state funds. So we can help you kind of think through that process of how to fully fund your project. And it's possible that our loan programs could be an essential part of your project delivery. So things that we do that the FRA does not do. So we offer some technical assistance that FRA does not do, especially in terms of thinking through innovative finance opportunities. We offer these technical assistance programs, these grant programs that are a little bit different from what FRA offers and what's offered in the rest of the department, and they tend to be for early planning that's difficult to receive funding for. In terms of our loan programs, I think, again, our loans can be used for your local match. What else do I have here? Our loans can be used, we offer loans to private entities. So that's something that's different for the grant program. Sometimes you might have a private party that wants to be, that is a part of your project. We see that with Brightline, we might see that with station development or transit-oriented development. And what else do I have here? Sorry, my eyes are not very...
We're running out of time.
We're running out of time. So welcome to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Alex from Amtrak.
All right. I'm going to stand up because I can't see that. Oh, that's still your slide.
Yes.
Here's his contact information. Call him.
And for some reason, you can't see it either.
Okay. Oh, that's not me.
And that is the next job. I guess we're changing order.
I apologize.
All right, I'll be fast. All right.
Click for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Next slide, please. There we go. Thanks. And we've covered this in a previous presentation. We're Pacific Northwest Economic Region, 5 states, joining with 5 Canadian provinces to the north of the border, and just received earlier this year the designation for a regional infrastructure accelerator. And we're focusing in on a couple projects. So next slide. You all have had an opportunity to pore over the billions of dollars that are in the IIJA, but I do want to call out 2 chunks, $12 billion in infra grant money, and also this new, really first ever designated program really focused on grade separations. In my earlier session, I talked about grade separations as one of those kinds of projects that bring communities together. It definitely requires partners, city, state, federal, regional, railroad, and they are really good opportunities. They don't guarantee capacity expansion or any of that sort, but what they provide is the opportunity to improve the corridor, and that's what we're talking about. And if you can do a number of those, then you get closer to sealing the corridor, which is ideal from a perspective of being able to provide low risk, high level of safety, fluid service. So just bear that in mind as among the valuable new chunks of money that the IIJA, and that's why it's different. It's not just more money in the same pots. It's really more money in new grant programs and a new dedicated program. Just one very big 40,000-foot level. Let's not forget the fact that the IIJA isn't just about transportation funding. It really has 4 major goals, right? Rebuild and repair our transportation system, multimodal. Access clean water, high-speed internet broadband, and then clean and affordable power. Now, there's a whole lot of synergy. Last session was about synergy between freight and passenger. There's a whole lot of synergy going on between those major themes in this piece of legislation. And we're going to see that carry forward as we continue. So, next slide. See how fast we're going through this? And these are really big words, so there's not a lot on the slide, so we'll be able to go through this very quickly. But so as you're building partnerships, as you're building a rapport and a relationship with that Class 1 railroad that you want to work with, think about those projects. David mentioned a great project, Tower 55. There's lots of them. There's one that is squarely within your regional territory that's really on the cusp of being completed, and that's a second bridge across Lake Pend Oreille at Sandpoint. That has been a choke point. You've got lots of capacity on either side, but you got one bridge. And this second bridge is huge. Now, it's moving freight and a couple Amtrak trains. But in terms of its future and in terms of its ability to get the permitting to build the project, there were a lot of folks with their shoulder to the wheel who didn't necessarily have an immediate stake in it. Organizations like PNWER and others that said, you know what, if it's good for freight, it can be good for passenger service, and even if it's just good for freight, that's good for our region, and that's good for meeting those public policy goals that we've talked about in previous sessions, right? Lower emissions, lower traffic congestion, and less wear and tear on the highways. All those kinds of improvements are really important. So work to build a coalition of support that is region-wide. Don't be confounded or stuck within a jurisdiction, a city, a county, a region, or a state. You've got some terrific state DOT directors, rail division directors that work together. They work across those borders to build and understand what's being tossed over the transom. So it's not just separate states, but they recognize the value of corridors. So let's take advantage of that and build a corridor coalition of support. And then finally, just a gratuitous pitch for our RIF webinar. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. I already mentioned these points. See, we're just sailing through. The last point is this RIF and RIF Express, improvements made to the RIF program that can benefit short line railroads, ports, lots of folks that are trying to deliver rail programs and can benefit perhaps from, maybe it's gap funding, maybe they received a grant or some other funding, but they've got a gap to close. And that's where a RIF loan could really be a very effective and valuable tool. So RIF webinar coming up September 12th. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you.
Well, let's see.
Yeah. Oh, that's my contact information. And my home phone number. No, it's not on there. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. How are we doing on time?
We can get another 10 minutes,
Okay.
5 minutes for questions.
Okay, Alex Khalfin with Amtrak. It's great to be here to talk about exciting topic of intercity passenger rail expansion. I almost want to pinch myself because we're talking about actually expanding. I wanted to start out by showing this slide. It's one of my favorite ones. It's our 1971 network slide. And there's a reason why I have it up, because I'm about to show you the next slide. That's today. So if that looks familiar, it's because it's almost the same. And I think, when you look at that, you sort of ask the question of why are we here? And A couple of days ago, there was an op-ed in the paper by Secretary of Transportation and the FRA administrator that basically said that America has failed to invest in passenger rail system like other countries have. So this really is the result of that. And in fact, over 50 years of Amtrak's existence, we've mainly talked about survival and reduction. So it's very difficult to have any meaningful discussion around expansion when you're trying to really survive to next year. But in 2019, we did something different, and I have to admit it caught me off guard a little bit. We rolled out our Amtrak Connexus vision, which really talked about connecting more places and connecting more people. It was really designed to be a starting point of a conversation that folks can have around expanding service. It's not all inclusive, and clearly there are parts of this map that are missing, and we are more than eager to have conversations with all the stakeholders and states to really work on what should be on this map. At the end of the day, it's not Amtrak's vision, it's America's vision, and we are looking forward to working with everyone, with all states, to see what makes sense. So one of the things that I think we're tasked with today is to really think about what are the opportunities in IIJA. Because this really is an opportunity to reinvent of what passenger rail may look like. And it's not going to be an easy task, but it's one that I think we have to take advantage of. What's different this time around, because we certainly have had these conversations in the past, but what's different this time around is we have some tools. So this is the $66 billion that's in the IIJA. I'm hoping that's correct. And the two boxes that are sort of really important, it's all important, but the two boxes that are relevant to Amtrak, I think, is your national grant and your Fed and state partnership, and that's where the corridor ID program comes in. So, I mean, in the most basic way, the national grant, what does it mean to Amtrak? Well, it means new equipment, it means capital work on assets that we own, and it means bringing up our stations to ADA compliance and working on improvements to IT systems, reservations, etc. I won't get into detail here because I'm sure you've heard enough about the corridor ID program. That's the $12 billion bucket. But the bottom line is, right now, the FRA is looking for statements of interest. And you heard yesterday from the FRA administrator that you ought to submit those sooner rather than later. Because the goal here is to establish a pipeline of projects that then will be used for corridor development purposes. So I understand this is not an easy thing to sort of wrap your arms around, but I think it's a crucial part of the process. I mean, you've heard about this before as well. I'll just skip through this one. And then there's also the FRA-led Amtrak long-distance service study. It's also an opportunity to look at routes that have been discontinued and routes that are not daily and see if they should be daily. That is another tool for communities to use to expand. Here are some routes that could be considered. I won't go through to each one of them because I think you get the flavor here. And I'll wrap up with this, and I promised it was going to be fast. So the question has to be asked why we're doing this, and I think everyone in this room understands why we're doing this. But as we're talking to folks outside of this room, I think this illustrates the point. Here is a peak period congestion on the national highway system in 2012. This is what it might look like in 2045. That is not sustainable. I don't care what side of the aisle you stand, what issues you care for. We can't honestly look at that and say that's where we want to be. And I don't think we can build out roads to address this. There are certain places in California, for example, where you can no longer build roads. So we have to really think strategically to invest in the infrastructure and the assets that we have that will help us address sort of all of the issues, not just transit, but equity, environment, connectivity, serving communities that haven't been served, and bringing back service to places where it should be. And I think that the way to do it is to really have an honest conversation about what it would take to get there. These are really difficult topics to discuss. It involves partnerships between folks that sometimes work well together and sometimes don't. We'll probably disagree on some things and we'll agree on others, but that looks really bad to me, and I don't want to live in a place like that. So I think rail provides an opportunity to start moving away from that possibility, and I think the conversations here are really important. So I'll stop there. Pass it to...
Yeah, finally, we have Laura Shabe with Cambridge Analytica.
Oh, one last thing. Contact, and where's Chase? Chase Kitchen, who's back there, he is in our Government Affairs Department in Seattle, covering the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Montana, British Columbia. So he is your contact for this region. Please stop by and say hi to him, and you're more than welcome to call me or email me as well.
Oh, I'm going to save you the slides. Just talk to me for a few minutes. I think I only have a couple of minutes, right?
So, 5 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes.
Okay, great. I got 5 minutes. So I was one of the people that raised their hands for grant applications. So I'm sort of I'm taking this in a slightly different direction. I think we've talked a lot about the vision, and I'm a vision person, I'm a planner. But what I've discovered over my 29 years, and I look so young, I know, but 29 years of experience is that, and Kat brought this up, and I remember it's, where is the low-hanging fruit? Again, you want to work both ends of your project. And, the corridor, it gets to be slightly overwhelming. And I learned how to do this, I'll tell you, from FHWA. I had a great mentor there. But what can we move ahead while we're waiting for the corridor? How are we going to get ready for the corridor? Because, again, even if FRA picks our Montana corridor for the long distance, there's stuff we can do in the meantime. And it's going to be a long time. That's not how you implement the corridor. What can we do in between? And the reason I bring this up, and Deb mentioned it, Chrissy grants, and that's what we have been doing for a lot of our clients, is not just Chrissy, but all the discretionary funds, and looking at projects that have dual purpose. Again, a perfect example of something that's very successful, and Spencer is here, knows about this, is in Pueblo along the Colorado Front Range. That county went ahead and decided where its rail station would be far ahead of that service ever coming into being. And in a sense, it drives, maybe to the consternation of CDOT, but still, it drives that discussion. A certain place that wants rail, and I'm thinking here of Bill, I'm putting an idea in your head. You can take, you don't have to wait. You can drive and show the interest, go out there and get grants for that type of situation, or even just public, other private money, and work both ends. You have your regional authority that has the vision, but you need to bring it to the ground. I mean, that's what we've seen across the country where these things become successful. And Colorado is a great example of that, the Colorado Front Range. Other examples, Denver, where we worked with the Rock Island Railroad with Randy. Randy over here remembers that. Things where you make these incremental changes while the vision is happening. And then it becomes more real. And I will also say that's where, and I wrote a whole list while we were having the freight, the synchronicity. And, I have a long list of very great collaborations with the class ones, with the short lines, when we start to talk about, operations and these grants. And a lot of them, now I can't find the page, of course, because, I'm talking. But, BNSF, here we go. BNSF, Amtrak, UP for the Southwest Chief. We got in a room, we marked it up. All three railroads, Amtrak was there. Where are we going to put this new siding? Right? These kinds of questions that then invigorate your, partner, right? Talk about something that they are interested in. We'd like to bring this, where do you think this would be? BNSF, again, Link US in Los Angeles. That was an infra grant. Malabar Yard, the relocation, those are all things where, we're really talking with BNSF, for the purposes of a grant. And my counterpart, Karen's not here, but UP and the Brooklyn subdivision, ODOT, putting in a siding. UP very active in that discussion with Oregon DOT. And then again, BNSF and Ron's here, Chrissy Grant on the Amtrak Cascades, landslides, new equipment. We've been collaborating with the Class 1s. I don't really, you have the models, you bring in your technical expertise. Those have all been very successful, and about half of these grants we won. So that shows progress. And I'm very nervous because FRA, I could tell you how to win a grant because I have a lot of experience, and I'm not sure it's true, right? But quickly, go through the eligibility, tell a story. What's the story about your project? And again, we do a service because it makes it fun for you to read. Fun sounds funny. But when you read the whole thing, it goes, I'm looking at Spencer, we wrote that for the Southwest Chief. It made an impact, and we won. Start early. I'm probably over my time. Start early. We see a lot of clients that wait till the NOFO comes out. Not cool. Well, we do it anyway. We'll do it as fast as we can, but it's fun to do it ahead of time so that we can help you craft the story. And this is something. Letters of support, and again, from your host railroad and from the community. I'm thinking of Billings and the Billings Clinic. I mean, are they on your short list? These kinds of community impacts, not impacts, but benefits, and show those in letters to FRA. We recommend 25. So that means you get start early, right, for those letters of support. You talked about the rural set-aside. And again, some of us love these grant applications. There's nothing better than a deadline to focus the mind on planning, because planning, it's fun and you think, but then you got a deadline, so I enjoy it. It's like, let's make some decisions, in those 90 days. And we see a lot of stuff happening with DOTs and local communities, and so that just brought it down to a different discussion. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have 3 minutes for questions. I'll ask the first one, but maybe we get some hands, and I'm sure they'll be around after. But Karen Hedlund talked about building a program that can survive election cycles. We are in one right now. Based on historical data, there's a decent chance we change at least one house, maybe both, to Republican control. But we saw the first round of FY21 Fed state grants, and they all went to deeply blue states. And I think they all had done trifectas except for Maryland with a Republican governor. I know why that happened based on past investments, but how do we, the panel, think we build and implement a IIJA rail program in a way that gets red state buy-in and shows benefits to Republican delegations?
It's easy. We put something in it for everybody. We have passenger, we have freight, we have big freight, we have short lines. We're very lucky we've had these programs in one way or another, or some of them at least, for a few years. But there's something in it for everybody. I think a really good example was when the House was working on reauthorization during their markup, a Republican member proposed removing all of the Amtrak funding and putting it all in Chrissy. And I wish you all could have seen my face when that came up, because I'm not sure that would have been the case 5 years ago. I don't think that even the Chrissy program had that level of support. So yes, we had what I will refer to as old Fed state, which was really made for the Northeast. State-owned infrastructure. There's bits of it all over the place, but the bulk of it is in the Northeast. Well, we've changed that program, right? There's the Northeast bit, but there's something for everyone else. We've bulked out Chrissy to be 3 times the amount of money it had, so we can do many more of the projects that benefit folks who, frankly, were skeptics of rail funding.
Just one small comment. The more I hear about the corridor identification program, the more I see the genius in that, really, because it is a bottom-up and a top-down at the same time planning, process. And under PREA, there was this mandate to produce a national rail plan. I worked at the Volpe Center at the time. We worked on the national rail plan. We worked on a preliminary plan and a national plan, and it was never really produced. I think having a map with lines drawn on it that has input from the bottom up and the top down will be something that will foster kind of a continuation of this, because when your constituents see that you are on that map, that they are on that map, they will want to implement that eventually. So,
Brief comment. The project itself can't compete. The project itself can't be the advocate. So we've heard this before, but bipartisan rail caucuses, whether it's in the state legislature or that transcends congressional delegations from one state to another. Rural Eastern Washington is going to support short line and freight, and Western Washington is generally going to support passenger service. That's not a given, but those are kind of alignments that have worked very well for decades, and you'll find the same thing is true in Montana and other places. So, and as has been said before, and we're all we're grabbing onto this with great passion, and that is that there are still some bipartisan examples out here in the West of working together, and so take advantage of that with rail caucuses.
If you want to close out on Amtrak's note, and then I think we'll have
Sure. I'm very optimistic about what's happening. There's something different going on, and I've been through these cycles a couple of times now. And I think it came full circle for me when, in a matter of 3 hours, I spoke to a very conservative mayor, Interstate, and then had a similar conversation with a very liberal mayor in the same state. These folks tend to disagree on just about everything, and they made it very clear. But yet, when it came down to the corridor ID stuff, they literally said, this is a no-brainer, and we will be happy to work together on this issue. And that's why I think we may have an opportunity here for this to really survive, regardless of what happens. I mean, I'm not naive to say that it's a slam dunk, because I do worry about that too. But there's something different going on, and everyone is sort of looking at what their situation is and how it can be helpful to them. So as I'm traveling throughout the territory that I cover, this is the theme that's becoming very obvious to me, that this seems to reach across the party lines, at least at the local level.
Okay, thank you to the panel. I'll turn it over.
Yes, thank you, panelists. And just a personal comment on especially that last point about bipartisanship. I think that in the terms of passenger rail service, that the conversation has really changed around that on a bipartisan level. You look at the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. Out of our 12 founding member counties and our 18 current counties, I mean, I represent Dawson County, Montana, which, if any of you know anything about Dawson County, Montana, or eastern Montana in general, you cannot find, these are not liberal bastions, right? You cannot find a more deep red conservative part of the country. And I don't have people in my community coming up and saying, oh, that passenger rail service, that's a joke. I have people in my community from the commissioners on down coming and asking me, when do you think it's going to happen? So I think that there has been a shift in how that's viewed on a bipartisan basis, and is one of the few things I think that there's becoming widespread bipartisan agreement on. So hopefully that will continue into the future. So thank you to our panelists. Another round of applause.